Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. And it's been a lot of fun working with Heather and David and Peter to set this up. And, you know, talk about nostalgia. I started going back to when I started in this industry in 1974, and all the people who helped me. So kind of things that were helpful to me that I've recast to, I hope, be helpful for you. Okay, so here's what I'm covering. If I actually talked through all of my slides, this would take about 20 minutes, and we don't want to do that. I'm trying to keep it to 10. So if you see something on here you want to hear more about, you can just take a little note, because we're each going to speak and then do the questions. So I approach this as thinking, you know, mentoring is sort of a more senior person identifying a more junior person and helping them. But this panel is more about you taking responsibility for your own career and figuring out how to be proactive and getting the help that you need. So that's why I call it yin and yang. Okay, so here's me. I was a library paraprofessional before I ever got my master's. Went to libraries, worked on a doctorate, and that doctorate was a real turning point for me, because I had decided early on that I really liked being on the business side of libraries, the people that buy and license the information and get to work with the vendors and publishers. That's what was really interesting to me, and I kept trying to find ways to get to do more of that. So I took the PhD experience to kind of shift gears and recast myself to work on the other side. And it worked. I got recruited out of that PhD program by someone who had not yet been the president of SSP, but he had started his own .com, and I got to be employee number 3. So that's a great way to learn a lot of different things, because you wear many hats. When I became a consultant after 2 .coms crashed, all of my clients were from referrals from the network I'd built. So in my consulting, you know, you get advice to pick one thing and focus on it, but I have sort of a broader scope. I do primarily do nonprofits, but not exclusively. And I put ARL in red here, the Association of Research Libraries. That was an interesting project I got to do because I was doing what I always do at conferences. I was meeting people and talking to them and finding out what they're interested in. And I had a conversation with the executive director of ARL about a project my colleague Judy Luther and I had been working on to figure out how we could advise single journal publishers who were still in print and couldn't figure out how to get into e-journals, and did they want to go with packages and things like that. And he sort of on the spot said, "That's a great idea, we'll fund it, send me a proposal." So, you know, you get reinforced for doing things that way. I had a lot of mentors. My first mentor was trying to get me to go and get my master's degree. So she took me to ALA. It was in DC, we were in Chapel Hill, 5-hour drive. She drove, had me stay in her room, got me introduced around to vendors who would invite me to meals, so it was really cheap for me to do, and sort of repeated that pattern. And the first SSP I ever came to, I was invited as a speaker in 1988, and I loved it. It's like, here are my people. So I've been a member since then. So thinking about how long I've been doing this and why I like doing it, I think it really goes back to my managerial responsibilities, having a staff of people that didn't make a lot of money, and graduate assistants who were in library school and were sort of on their way into careers and maybe weren't sure what they were doing. And I really enjoyed helping people figure that out. You know, so if you were on my staff, I couldn't always give you more money, but I could really help you think about your skills, your skill gaps, the things that interested you, things you'd like to try, and I would do my best to find opportunities for you. And one of the key ways we did that was to look at job descriptions. I'd say, go out and look at the job ads. Bring me back 3 that you're interested in, and we'll analyze them. We'll see if there's something I can do to help you match up with these. So from that perspective, get the promotion. Don't wait until a promotion is available. Plan ahead. Be ready. It's like, when something comes open, I'm going to have the kind of experience they're looking for. And there are all kinds of ways you can get experience. Sometimes you need to change jobs to do it, but a lot of times you can just volunteer for things. Or, it's like you can't neglect your original responsibilities, but if you can handle all of that and take on more, that gets you noticed. That gives you some credibility, and people will think about you. Recruiters, like David, I have 2 or 3 recruiters who call me. I've got this job open. Who do you know? So you want to get on people's radar. So when they're checking around and saying, who do you know who could do this? In Boston, where I'm based, we're really fortunate. BWIN, I see Laura's here. She is a BWIN person. It stands for the Boston Women in Information Network. And it's been around 16 years or so now. It's essentially a monthly or quarterly networking group with mid-career to more senior people. We have speakers, we help each other do things. It was originally designed as sort of a safe space for women to talk about the glass ceiling, problems with their supervisors, problems with their staff. It was a place where, what happens in BWIN stays in BWIN. And it still kind of does that, but it's broadened out some. And when the Washington Women in Information preceded it by 15 years or something, SSP is doing something similar with its regional groups, which I think is really exciting. And I think another reason Heather thought about asking me is that I've looked at these really porous boundaries now between working in libraries or publishing or working with vendors. When I was starting out, it was much more rigid. And, I got advice in my master's program. Pick the kind of library you want to be in, because that's where you're going to be. If you start in public, you stay in public. You start in academic, you stay in academic. And it's really not like that anymore. There are a lot of library jobs that don't require library degrees, and where a publishing or a vendor background can be really valuable. And it works the other way too. I know a number of people with library degrees who work for publishers and vendors because they have insights into that market that people who haven't worked in libraries don't have. And I talk about mentors with the capital M and mentors with the lowercase m. It doesn't have to be as heavy duty as you are going to be my only mentor and we will be together for 20 years. That's what I used to think it was, and it's not. It can be, but it's much more typical to have sort of episodic mentors or people for different areas of your life or at different points in your career. And, if you identify somebody that you admire and you think, wow, I wonder what he thinks about this or wonder about that, just ask. Ask people, send them an email. The worst thing that happens is they say, gee, I think I'm not the best fit, but I'll be on the lookout, or, I'll send you to somebody else. And these are all things I've done with my protégés recently, like in the last couple of years. And I'll highlight a couple of sort of case studies. The supervisor issues. A young woman who had, when she got her library degree, she couldn't get a library job, so she worked for a research firm. Then she got a library job, and she was thrilled because that's what she'd wanted to do. And she started having some pretty serious issues with her supervisor. Her supervisor wouldn't tell her about meetings, would sort of undercut her and make her look bad. She was really getting stressed and had started job hunting before I saw her at one of our twice-a-year conferences, and she told me all about it. So my advice was, well, what have you tried? What have you tried working with this woman to try and figure out what's going wrong and how you could get it on track? And once we agreed that there really wasn't anything she could do, I counseled her to go 2 levels up in the hierarchy and talk to a more senior person about what was going on. And it was sort of an educated risk, but that person 2 layers up in the hierarchy had been one of my graduate assistants at LSU. And I knew she would get a fair hearing. And sure enough, what happened within 6 months is that the supervisor left, and my protege was promoted. So, reviewing job offers. I had another young colleague who had started applying for jobs and was all full steam ahead to get her second professional job, and she was recruited hard to interview at one place and got the job offer. Well, from the time she applied to the 4 months later when the offer was being made, her dad had died. And she was so torn. She lived really near her mom and siblings and felt like she needed to stay for them, but that she would be ruining her career if she withdrew from the search and declined to take this nice promotion that she'd been so heavily promoted for. And she was making herself miserable. And I said, well, it sounds like you need my permission to turn this job down. There's nothing that says you always have to put your career first. And if if the people that you turn the job down for hold that against you, well, they're one library. You've got a lot of other opportunities, and you will have many more. And another thing I pointed out to her, I said, it sounds like you're primarily taking this job because you want to work for that library director. And she is fantastic. She's dynamic, she's charismatic. I can see the appeal. But did you ask her how long she's going to be there? Hasn't she been there 5 or 6 years already? How would you feel if you turned everything upside down, moved over there, and she left? She said, well, those are all good points. So she ended up not taking the job, staying put, and now she thinks I'm psychic because a year later, that library director left. So those are some highlights I thought might interest you. And really, what it's about, probably not too many of you saw Joseph Campbell interviewed by Bill Moyer on PBS in 1985. But this guy is studies myths, and he's kind of on the spiritual side of things. I just think he's fantastic. I love his books, I love what he has to say. And what he talks about, both in life and in jobs, is that you find the things that you're good at and give you pleasure and where you can really excel because there's an affinity, and the universe will open doors for you. So that's my parting advice. Get in that flow, get in a place where you can really contribute. And I'm going to turn this over to the next person and look forward to questions. Thanks.